شكرا سامي أهلا وسهلا فيكم. I just want to say a few words in English for our friends on Zoom. Welcome to this conference. It will be mostly in English, but part of some members of Nassim's fan club in North Lebanon, in Kura and Akkar, have requested that he says a few words in Arabic. So please bear with us. And in any case, on YouTube, we will arrange subtitles. Thank you all for being with us. We are delighted to host Nassim Taleb today at USG. He came 4 years ago to discuss the economic crisis, and we used the same title, From Ponzi to Antifragility, 4 years later. Today, Nassim's idea was to have an open conversation about various subjects, about the current war on Gaza, obviously, but also about the Lebanese economy 4 years later. 4 years later, is it doing better? We will discuss nationalism, localism. We will also discuss conspiracy theories that are becoming increasingly widespread, particularly after the pandemic. There is no need to introduce Nassim Taleb. You all know his work. You are familiar with his itinerary. I just wanted to point out that in today's world, what is particularly interesting about persons like Nassim Taleb is that they are not predictable. They are never dull. And he is quite courageous, very bold. If you have been following him on Twitter in the past 3 months, he took a very courageous stance after the war started. And when you are a public figure in the United States, when you are the author of numerous bestsellers, you are very rapidly targeted by very vicious attacks when you have the courage to call a spade a spade. So when you read Nassim Taleb, you always learn, you are always interested by his insights. You can disagree with him or agree with different aspects, but what we can say is that he is always interesting, never dull. He's sort of a Levantine Umberto Eco. He never wrote a novel so far. He might do it at a later point, but it's always interesting to follow him. He's a polymath, he's a mathematician and a philosopher. He does not like to refer to himself as a philosopher, but his essays do contain numerous philosophical insights. So I suggest, without further ado, to start our conversation. His book, The Black Swan, you have all heard about it. I hope many of you have read it and will read it. It's definitely one of the most influential books of the past 2 or 3 decades. It is widely discussed in popular culture. Several heads of state have discussed it with Nassim, from India's Narendra Modi, several business leaders like Elon Musk, George Soros, many other world leaders have had conversations with Nassim and asked for his advice. The Indian government asked him for advice on how to handle the COVID pandemic. And his friend Nadim Shhade was telling me a couple of days ago that nul n'est prophète en son pays, and that maybe Lebanese leaders, it's not a bad thing, yes, but Lebanese leaders might want to listen to Nassim before other world leaders call him to ask for his advice and insight. So Nassim comes from a family that has contributed significantly to Lebanese academic life and Lebanese political life in North Lebanon, but also at the national level. He is familiar with our university, and we thought it would be an ideal location to discuss the economic crisis first 4 years later. But let's start with the current war on Gaza. From the very beginning, Nassim, you very boldly expressed your views. You are quite famous in the United States. You were immediately targeted by certain pro-Israeli propagandists, and you always say that you don't care about your reputation. Is this what makes you an independent thinker? Do you think that the role of an intellectual is not to care about his reputation and to speak whatever he thinks is true, to speak truth to power?
Yeah, okay. No, before I start, let me first say a few things. Number one, he called me a philosopher. I'm a Levantine. Of course, I consider myself a Levantine. And in Levantine, falsa, philosopher, means bullshitter. Okay, So, and it stuck to me. So to me, I mean, first of all, a lot of philosophy is effectively bullshit. So I tell you frankly, I take that as an insult. That's my first one. The second one, the title was From Ponzi to Localism. And the talk I gave here, and everybody was confused because some people came, they wanted advice on whether no, they didn't want advice. They wanted me to tell them that their money is going to be okay, and the money is not going to be okay. And they wanted, so some people came here for the money, some people came for localism, which can be interpreted any way you want, whether you're on the left, on the right, or caviar socialist, whatever you want, okay? And so it was a very interesting session. But at no point have had a single comment that was of substance. Because I basically said there was a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi schemes are very simple. You really must be very, very, very confused to not understand the Ponzi scheme. And practically everybody was confused. And people still are. They still can't get it that it was a Ponzi scheme. We can talk about that later. So let me answer your question about reputation. I mean, maybe it's a genetic mutation or something, but I've discovered that intellectuals typically, what we consider intellectuals today, are people you're never going to hear about. Like Bernard-Henri Lévy, you're never going to hear. After he dies, about 2 hours later, he's gone. Okay, all these guys. So when we look back in history at past figures, you realize that these past figures are not the ones who were prominent during their day. Okay, so if you're looking to be prominent, and first of all, I'm not interested in heads of state. It just so happens if they read my book and they're interested, I can talk to them, but I don't give advice. And usually they like to talk to authors to have their picture taken mostly. So you can say that, look, I'm intellectual, I'm getting good ideas, and I'm going to serve my country well, and they get more votes. Okay, so I'm not interested in giving advice. So it's going to tell you one thing. If you look at the role of someone who wants to play something in society, if you care about your reputation, you're dead. Because they're going to get you somewhere. You have to care about honor, about a lot of things, but not your reputation. And if you don't care about your reputation in a weird way, people leave you alone because they're afraid, because they care about their reputation. You see? So, and the way I was attacked by a few people, and the way I answer is not by telling them, hey, you're a whatever, racist, Islamophobe, settler or so on. No, no, you just you explain to them that there are a lot of, that there are some logical mistakes in your statement, and so they're humiliated because it's no longer about ideology, but about the functioning of their logical system. And they feel offended. So they leave me alone, they find other targets. Plus, sometimes I get angry with someone and I go after them. Absolutely no holds barred, nothing. I just go, after someone, and I keep pounding on them. So once in a while, every couple of years. So the thing is, I enjoy the fight. If you don't enjoy the fight, don't have any idea. Don't express yourself publicly because they're going to go after you.
Thank you, Nassim. Now that we have addressed your idea of your representation of the role of an intellectual, let's start talking about the substance. When this war started, one of your first comments was that we live in an age where ethno-states, ethnic nationalism had become sort of outdated. You are, and just yesterday you were mentioning that until the Congress of Vienna, there were only a few,
Two of them.
only two that were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. He mentioned the Greek and the Italian, the Greek unification that occurred before Italy and Germany.
Yeah, no. So what happened is the notion of a state was after Westphalia. There were no states before this, but it became a territory of a king. That's what a state traditionally is. At the Congress of Vienna in 1815, there were only two states that were not territories of kings: the United States and Switzerland. And people were very confused. They couldn't understand. So it was not. There was no. Your ethnicity doesn't map to your administration. The idea of nation state started effectively. The first constructed one was Greece, And the Greeks, or people who spoke the Greek language, were part of the, who were part of the Ottoman millet system, were Romi, like Rum, like the Rum of Beirut, like Rum of Kura, in the same group, and self-identified as Romi. So if they opened a coffee shop in New York, it would be called Saint Demetrios. Okay, that was their identity. And then the Germans somehow, because they wanted to, there's that idiotic notion of Aryan race. In fact, they're not even related to the Greeks. They wanted some kind of nobility of descent. So built up that notion of ancient Greece, rebuilt it, and effectively the first state, but before the unification of Germany, was the state of Greece outside the Ottoman Empire. And now when Greek goes to New York to open a coffee shop, they don't call it Saint Demetrios, or they call it, Hercules, or Socrates or Aristotle, something like that. So you can see how identities can be constructed, and the modern nation state was practically born in the 19th century and started to die recently. Because identities change, so it can't be stable over time. City-states are much more functional. Hopefully, we'll talk about that later with localism. Nation-states were no nations; they were tribes. Okay, but tribes don't map to states, except again. I mean, when we talk about the Israelis, they had maybe 80 years and then 100 years where the tribe mapped to a state. Not even then. So. The modern state, okay, is being recreated where people's identity is separate from that of the state. It's very easy in England because they didn't reach the notion of nation state. They're still a territory of a king, and you're subject of a king. So they don't have a problem having an Indian prime minister. France is different because it's very constructive, but that's going away. As we see in the Ukraine, for example, you can feel Russian and yet not want to be part of Russia, just like you can speak French and live in Switzerland. Your culture is French. It doesn't have to, your administration doesn't have to map to a state. So this thing's becoming obsolete. And so with Israel, not only you have a nation state, but you have a settler nation state. You've taken someone else's territory and you have to spin a narrative. And we're about 100 years too late.
This is quite a significant statement. Are you saying that Israel cannot survive? If I understood correctly from our interview last week, you say Israel has to radically change its model. Israel
I mean,
I'm
saying euphemism why this thing can survive, because, and think about it, unless you have apartheid, you have now about what, plus or minus 6 million persons of the Jewish persuasion in that territory. Plus, if you add the Palestinians on both sides, you end up with about 6 to 7 million Palestinians. I think something Guru was it? Didn't understand that you have dynamics and you have generations. Okay, so you can imagine very easily that unless you have constant apartheid, it cannot be an ethnic Jewish state. But there's something even more confusing. The only state in the world that bears a name of jurisdiction, an administrative state, which one is it? There's only one state in the world that has for name, okay, the jurisdiction. In other words, the jurisdiction of whatever X. What? Sorry? No, no. Saudi Arabia, no, Israel. Name is Medina, Israel. Deen means law. So it's called it's remarkably the only ethno-state I know of, fundamentally, because it is in the constitution, it must be Jewish, okay, has for name, okay, the exact opposite of the ethno-state. It's a quite interesting paradox.
Very interesting paradox indeed. So basically, Nassim is arguing that it's either apartheid or a move towards equality, pretty much what Jimmy Carter wrote in the late 1990s. And this paradox brings me to another paradox. You often mention that during the 90s and 2000s, people in Lebanon felt rich without being rich. In the built-up phase of the Ponzi, we were all living in a world of delusions. People thought that Riyadh Salami could print dollars. When the crisis occurred, many people were in denial, and some of them remain in denial to this day. Can you point out, Nassim, can you just point out how and when did you realize that the Lebanese model was going to collapse, and evaluate the situation 4 years later? Because you have to remember that in 1997, he came to AUB, he gave a conference called Unsafe at Any Speed. The title is from Ralph Nader, and he said very clearly that the peg with high interest rates would not work and would ultimately collapse.
Okay, so it is, you really have to be a sucker to think that someone's going to pay you 7% just because they like you, okay, because you're Lebanese. But if you're American citizen residing in America, you're going to get 0%. Okay, think about it. So there's this this idea. The thing is, I don't know if you know my books, but I talk about the Turkey problem, where you accumulate, so if you think that you have a risk-free system because there's no volatility, as represented by a peg. So you don't have any variation, and you're accumulating profits because you're hiding randomness under the rug, and then the thing explodes. So that was, that's what I've been working on all the time. And as a matter of fact, the best predictor of the bankruptcy of a company is steady earnings, because it means that I explained antifragile. It means there's no information coming through the system. It means we have steady earnings, and the same thing, I commented on Israel. It means we have a large customer somewhere, and that large customer one day will die, retire, develop Alzheimer's. Something will happen to that large customer, and then it's going to collapse. In other words, there's no noise in the system. So the lot of stuff. So I was a currency trader at the time, and all these suckers, they love to have steady income. So they make money all the time, and then one day they lose everything, and they say, well, it was a Black Swan after the name of a very, very stubborn author. Okay, so that was what Bob Rubin did. And plus the system pays you to do that. Like Bob Rubin collected bonuses for 15 years or 12 years at Citibank. Citibank went bust. They lost back everything they made, but he didn't show up to work with his checkbook. In other words, he didn't have to pay back. So that's the system I was conscious of in the 80s when I started, doing the opposite trade, which is make money when something collapses, and try to develop the mathematical framework for that kind of payoff. And of course, you generalize it to a lot of things. What I call tail risk, tail event, tail dynamics. So anyway, so I came to Beirut in 97, and the lira was pegged, paying you much higher interest than whatever other currencies it was pegged to. I think it was pegged to the dollar at the time, and it was okay. And then people, of course, didn't like it, so they said that I was too stubborn. At the time, I was virtually unknown, and almost unpublished. I had one book called Dynamic Hedging, which was very opaque, and so that was my idea. And over time, you see the thing. So what we had, doubling up with the peg in Lebanon, you don't have in other places. You didn't have in other places. Is a central banker who really had to be the most incompetent central banker in history, because he did not know that being a central banker in Lebanon does not authorize you to print dollars, which is the currency of, the dollars is the currency of the United States. It's not the currency of the Central Bank of Lebanon. So it's not possible to do that unless you have some mechanism by which you dilute the story. So people, and then again, I mean, when people tell me they lost money, and I tell them, when did you start investing? Because if you invested $1 in the 90s, you probably would have had $3 in the or $2.50 by 2019. But there's another thing about this. Is what happens is people who are greedy, they always mark their book to the best. Not, they don't look at the accumulated profit. Anyway, so the Ponzi was developed to support the peg for some reason. And when I was here, we looked at the balances, we looked at everything. We realized that, hey, it's a Ponzi. The way to unwind it equitably is to have some kind of allocation. Nothing happened. Perhaps something a little more positive happened than I would have expected, that they have the gate by which people can withdraw the same amount of dollars regardless of the size of the accounts. And I don't know if you know the 80-20 rule, which I showed at the time, is that 80% of depositors own 20% of deposits and vice versa. It means that 50% of the deposits are in the hands of 1%. That's a universal law. So what I think has happened is that the bottom 20%, withdrew the 80% of the people withdrew the 20%. So I think now we're left with $90 billion dollars, and anyone with an account below 25K is pretty much safe. Or they took the money out, it's in the mattresses and being spent on overbidding for I don't know, restaurant meals or whatever it is. Okay, so so it was very democratic. So if someone has $100 million, you withdraw what, $20,000-$30,000. But so it's the same as if you had $20,000-$30,000. So anyway, so this is sort of my story with the Ponzi, and try to link it to my general work, which is the tail risk. In other words, you hide the tail risk. You make excess money, and then one day you lose it all. Exactly like short an option. No, when you sell an option in finance, it has the same payoff. And here it was doubled up with a Ponzi. Now, the weird thing is that people wanted to believe that Riyadh was very smart because they like making their 7-8%. By then it was like 12%. People like making steady money. They're just like, so they constructed stories to believe that the guy was a genius and he's going to get him out of it. So I think that roughly is what happened.
There's a bitter irony, Nassim, is that this person that you described as the most incompetent central banker in the world received dozens of awards by mysterious magazines that were heavily basically advertisements that were bought and paid for by the Lebanese central bank itself.
Yeah, I don't know what happens. There's a mechanism. I don't know if you want if you want to be the best political scientist in the Western world or in Asia, Central Asia, they have different prizes, or the best, whatever. You can have someone will call you up and give you a prize, and they say, okay, there's going to be a big gala dinner. How many tables do you want to buy? And then the table is 15K, and you buy 2 or 3 tables, invite your friends, and that's how they make their money. So this is why, first of all, I don't accept prizes. So it's not the Nobel Prize, granted by some kind of academic structure. It's a magazine, and there are a lot of such magazines, and make a lot of money doing that. And central bankers or bankers make a lot of money buying. Or plus, you have to buy the magazine to distribute to your friends, and they make a lot of money on that. It's a scheme.
So you mentioned this lack of mental clarity that was predominant in Lebanon 4 years ago. But if I understand correctly, you think that the situation in Lebanon today is slightly better. Is Lebanon becoming anti-fragile?
Yeah. So the whole idea I explained is that the state in Lebanon, a lot of people complain about corruption, and corruption is very bad. I mean, it's very bad for moral reasons, but it's not necessarily an economic hindrance. Patronage is a problem. You can have corruption. The expression is "Sallim khubzak lal-khabbaz walau akal nusfu." So that's the Lebanese expression. So in other words, you can give your bread to the baker, even if he stole half of it, get a baker. And in Brazil, there's a famous Lebanese maluf, and a bribe is called malufita. And he said, listen, I'm very, very competent, but I'm corrupt. So I deliver. So see, I steal, but I deliver. So it's this expression, mafaz, sorry. So no, but I deliver. And every time he would, they'd replace him with some idealistic left-wing fellow who would spend 50 million to go nowhere, build no bridges, bad planning. And then they would vote him back in. So that's Malouf. So, Italy, the Italian Renaissance, everything's built on corruption. So corruption, not necessarily bad. The problem we have in Lebanon is patronage. So patronage means that you hire someone completely incompetent, zilmi, to represent me. And the system we had was so that was what we had with the system. We had a central government, and the central government of Lebanon had like almost as an overt mission to destroy Lebanon, because they made everything difficult. And let's remember the destruction made by Riyad Ponzi. Riyad Ponzi, by pulling the money away from if you had a factory, why work? You put your money with Riyadh and everybody's happy and he's the greatest central banker in the world. Okay. And you make your 10% and you stay home. What's the point of having a bakery? What's the point of having an atelier? What's the point of having a food delivery system? What's the point of having agriculture? You give money to Riyadh. So 20 years of destroying the structure of the Lebanese economy, and plus the lira was very expensive. This is where we lost the money. The lira was artificially high, so you'd go to Switzerland, and it was cheap. Okay, so you realize that there's something, and that harmed the economy. It's sort of like having your thermometer frozen at one level. You're getting no information about the health of the patient, so there was no adjustment mechanism. So during the Ponzi years, a doctor making $20,000 thought he or she was making $20,000, but it was not $20,000. It's like in a Ponzi, if I had a Madoff share, I could go cash it in and get my $20,000. But if more than one person try to cash in, then the system is in trouble. So you're making money, you think you can convert it, you think you can travel with it, so long as not too many people are doing that. Okay, it was working. So a doctor now making $10,000 is effectively making a lot more than he or she did when they were making $20,000. You see, because they were not real dollars, they were like pre-dollars.
The point Nassim was making about corruption and the baker is interesting. It translates, actually, it's one of the old Lebanese saying, "Sallim khubzak lal khabbaz ولو سرق نصه."
I said it. You weren't listening. Yeah, you weren't listening. He was reading his
because
emails.
I learned it from Nassim yesterday evening, and I wrote it down. You translated it in Arabic, okay? So this idea is quite important, that corruption, however nefarious it might be, is not as dangerous as patronage and clientelism and the rent-based economy. The fact is today that the Lebanese economy, like most Middle Eastern economies, are rent-based economies. And your friend Ishaq Diwan, I don't know if he's here, co-edited this book, Crony Capitalism in the Middle East. What would you advocate to move away from this model of rent-based?
No, the system corrected itself. The state is very weak. First of all, people have the impression that we had a huge deficit. In fact, a lot of the deficit, the primary deficit was either tiny, non-existent. It was mostly interest on interest. The state was paying interest on interest on interest on interest, and of course, so what happened when you destroy the nefarious state? Good things happen because they maintain. What do you need a state for? Security. Well, we had security. I mean, I came here, I was not robbed even once. Okay. So it's not like Brazil. Okay. So the state in Lebanon, we have security. Okay. We have a functioning airport. So when you land, they stamp your passport. They don't beat you up or rip you off. And, so the state, we have security, we have an army, we have a functioning thing. And you don't have, so the Levant is not good with states because it's good with municipal systems are vastly better. And now a lot of the stuff done by the state has been transferred to municipalities. And some municipalities are better than others. So you have an ecology that's vastly richer than we had before, discrepancies between municipalities, competition between them, and it's working.
If I understand your vision of the state, you're not in favor of a welfare state. You're in favor of a state handling defense, security, healthcare.
And tail risk, basically. I mean, you have to bring everything back to the central idea. The state is there to handle your tail risk.
But some people argue that decentralization would not solve the corruption problems, that it might be more visible.
No, so my point about municipal thing is that people are better at first of all, dealing with common goods. So if you think the state is in Beirut far away, it's, you don't mind, you don't care about the state. You don't feel it's your money. If you're dealing in a small community and a lot of work has been done on it, you feel that people are sharing resources. You have your neighbors. You have shame. Corruption. Who cares about corruption? You care about competence. Okay. So you may have some corruption, although it's more visible. So you have the illusion of having more corruption. In fact, you don't have more corruption. You have less corruption. It's more visible. But people may want to have a little bit of corruption if it makes the system work better. So they're more effective at dealing with water, with immediate needs than a central state who have bureaucrats. I mean, my problem in life is bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
The bureaucrats they're into rent seeking, and it's very dangerous in countries that didn't have the state. I mean, we had a lot of bureaucrats in Lebanon, and now we have fewer bureaucrats, and they're there to make your life difficult. They're like parasites.
You spent a lot of time in Amun. What did you see in Amun? You interviewed its mayor once. He was
Yeah. So no, what you see is that people have skin in the game. That's the idea of the bureaucrat is removed from the consequences of her or his decisions. When someone lives in a community and drinks the water that they have worked on, so you have so it's called eat your own cooking. So and effectively it's better governance than otherwise. I think people complain about the Levant that were selfish and so on. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to find political systems that are adapted to the culture, the local culture. You see, we hate the state because of the Ottoman Empire, because people who were invaded necessarily will hate the state because it represents something nefarious. They're not there, because they love you. They're there because they want to. It's like a mafia don. They want to get their share of your economy, and this is ingrained in the culture and the psyche. And of course, if you can do away with that, you have to accept that there must be a political system. Instead of making the Lebanese change, you won't be able to, as every single party in Lebanon has done. You may be guilty of that. I have no idea. You should try to find a structure that fits the place.
interesting. You mentioned the mafia dons. We have more than our fair share in Lebanon. What is peculiar about our part of the world, it's not exclusive to our part of the world, is conspiracy theories. You have a lot of conspiracy theories in the United States, in Turkey, in Egypt, but sometimes we have the impression that the pandemic created a new wave, and there are many people who are still convinced that there are hidden hands controlling everything.
Conspiracy theories are very old. Okay, you just don't read about old conspiracy theories because they've been debunked. But it's part of human nature. And my first book, my first non-technical book, Fooled by Randomness, was about how people are naive to like the sensational and the salient over the statistical. Like, for example, people tell you, hey, this guy is those who trade on the markets get rich, not realizing there's a huge sample of people who didn't get rich went bankrupt, but you don't see them because they're not part of what you see. So the salient is sensational. And Stalin, always cite Stalin on a point that the way we work is not via our statistical machinery, but our emotional one, that the death of one child is a tragedy, the death of a million is a statistics. But let me tell you why conspiracy theories are not novel. I don't know if you remember, have someone read Le Collier de la Reine or stuff like that? There was this thing, the libelle in France, in the years leading up to the revolution, where because they had the printing press in England, so it was cheap and overactive, they would smuggle books, all kind of conspiracies. Okay, and that was a French national sport to read them. Okay, because of course the French, as you know, are they like stories, particularly when you have a sexual element to them. Okay, so and about the Queen, about a lot of things. So we had there were a lot of conspiracies at a time, but you don't hear about them because historians don't record what people believe. So with conspiracies and and just like and effectively people who are uh, fooled by randomness, same as people who fall for Ponzi's, are usually people who are very educated. Because the more intelligent you are, the more you're going to see spurious association between things. In um, in um, in, uh, in the beginning of Fooled by Randomness, I cited Rimbaud. I said he wrote in a poem, "J'ai vu des mosquées dans les nuages." He saw temples and mosques in the clouds. So he was so he had so that was when you develop paranoia, you start seeing patterns when there's none. And that's part of conspiracy theories. People will find a pattern that's very legit. So I did fight against conspiracy theories during COVID because a lot of people tell you, look at this guy, he just had the vaccine and a week later he had a heart attack. Okay, and then you say, okay, we can maybe, but the only way to look at it is, and a lot of intelligent people would use it as evidence. In fact, you got to look at how many people had ice cream and then a week later had a heart attack. And how many people had, I don't know, had skied in Vermont, and then came a week later had a heart attack. You have to count to see if it's effectively the vaccine or if it's you're imparting significance to things that have none.
You mentioned paranoia. It reminds me of an interesting book that was published in the 1960s by Richard Hofstadter, a famous American political scientist, called The Paranoid Style in American Politics. He was analyzing basically the lunatic fringes, those who are convinced that there is a Masonic conspiracy or a Jewish conspiracy or a Jesuit conspiracy. We are in Jesuits university here, and many people to this day are still convinced that it's a worldwide, that the Jesuits planted Pope Francis in the Vatican to promote rationalism and liberalism and tolerance, etc. So how do you explain the fact that these lunatic fringes, because at the time there were lunatic fringes in the United States, these groups appear to be taking over the world? And how do you explain
They're not. Okay, social media makes you, gives you the illusion that these people are more active than in the past. But we had even because it's simply because they have more information, and the more information you have, the more conspiracy theories you're gonna be able to detect. Like for example, I mean, we had a lot more conspiracies, and some of them were in the past sanctioned by the state, like the Protocol of Sages of Zion, the famous anti-Semitic documents. It was still were circulating in Egypt not long ago. Mm-hmm. And so you've had these in the past. Social media has a lot of good things, and also has a lot of bad things. I mean, just Elon Musk is one of the bad things, but in fact, no, in fact, I like him because of the Gaza thing proved to be fair. Okay, and
compared to Zuckerberg.
In other words, plus I don't mind a little bit of censorship. A little bit of censorship is good because people get more interested in what you're more interested in what people are trying to hide. Like an Antifragile, tell people something and tell them it's a secret if you want them to spread it. If you don't tell them it's a secret, they won't spread it. So I don't think that censorship, that's the fact that social media is effective. One thing I'll explain to you during the interview, the thing is not, it's not information you got to control, it's people. So in the past, you only got information from journalists, like the person at Le Point, Le Monde, these journalists. And if they stray a little bit, their boss gets a phone call from CRIF. And now suddenly they're going to do what the French call les chiens écrasés. They're going to have to work on I don't know, on page 19, you get the idea, the fait divers. So this is what happened. And in the United States, the same thing. You don't censor the information, you censor the provider of the information. Today, we have about 1 billion journalists. So you can't control information. And you can't control people. So, and the information is, because people can use euphemism.
You always say that you're not into current affairs, that you try not to read lots of newspapers, but you did film a short video before the last legislative election encouraging Lebanese people to vote, and not only to vote, but to sanction all those who were in office. So how do you view today's political establishment? How do you see change?
I have no idea. I think that the less we need to rely on the central state in Lebanon, except for important functions like, let's say, welfare, starvation, although it's taken care of organically, the better it's going to be. So you have to move away everything you can from the central state. They're not even capable of providing you with electricity. But Amun is 37% solar. So you have solar penetration in Lebanon is very, very high, thanks to the absence of the state. And look at how organic it is. The Israelis in 2006 went after, one of the main targets is the electric company. And today they're going to have what, 5,000 electric companies, right? So you realize how more stable the system becomes when it's distributed, not concentrated.
Okay, but in that situation, how would you prevent non-state actors with an agenda from taking advantage of people's poverty, from establishing clientelistic networks? Do you view this as?
No, you have, the state has a legal system. You enforce the Hayekin, or everybody believes that the state is there for forestry, to protect the environment, for pandemics, or things that require a state, not things that are optional for the state. And effectively, what I wrote in Antifragile is, the European Union, they have a lot of bureaucrats, about 200,000 of them in Brussels. And when you put bureaucrats together in a central thing, they start legislating. So they have rules about what to do if you have a truck, if you have a tractor, and the tractor has a windshield wiper. The speed of the windshield wiper should not exceed 19 things per minute. Yeah, so that's what they do, but they can't guard the borders, all right? So what happened is that the states start focusing on things that are so arcane, and they can't do the essentials. So you have to give the state as little as possible, and to make sure they can deliver it rather than all these things.
Interesting. We're already receiving interesting questions on Zoom, and I'm sure here in the audience you have lots of questions. One question that I'm seeing right now from Rena is, she's saying the Lebanese economy might be becoming more real. I guess she means as opposed to the financialization of the economy 4 years ago. Yet, how would you, Nassim, assess the risks of the prevailing cash economy, and how would you assess the wider income inequalities?
There are no, income inequalities. That's the kind of thing written by World Bank idiots. By agencies, by United Nations idiots. United Nations personnel. So try to hire a waiter in Lebanon. Try to hire a person for any function in Lebanon. You can find a doctor, but you can't find a secretary. Okay, so explain to me how you can have people and look at the number. It will start to import labor from South Asia. Okay, so Southeast Asia. So we have there is a so the economy there's a trickle down, not the Laffer trickle down. It means you lower taxes, rich people spend more, and you get it back. No, the trickle down is that when money goes into a system, it starts. You get distribution. And we saw that over the past 4 years, how effectively people at the bottom of the scale are actually now, okay, benefiting more than the upper classes. Not counting the fact that it's only the upper class that was hurt, the 1% that was hurt by the banking system, by the banking insolvency.
We also have a very existential question from Martin, who's saying, Mr. Taleb, what inspired you to become the person you are today? I think Martin will find part of the answer in Fooled by Randomness when you
No,
describe
I
your
think
teenage
no,
years.
it's a kind of question you don't answer. It's like I like
Yes.
tangible, I like very tangible questions.
But there are a
rather
few
than,
pages in Fooled by Randomness, Martin, that you could look at when you talk about your teenage years in Lebanon. I think this.
No. I mean, these were just to make the book more readable. All right?
Okay.
So it's
Okay, there's a guy named Nassim for president. So you also have a.
yeah. So what did you
So
want?
Nassim for president is asking, if you moved back to Lebanon, how would you be banking? How would you skin in the game? It's not possible to stay unbanked in a country.
I am banked in
50%
Lebanon in
of the
small
Lebanese.
amounts. First of all, people have the illusion that you put your money in the bank. Sorry, yeah, the bank is not where you put your money. Okay, the role of banking, okay, as you know, we've had disintermediation. So you don't put you put your money in whatever treasury bills of whatever country you feel is safe, but money in a bank is for suckers. Okay, so and then the other thing is banks are for suckers because banks are very poor at lending, and they only lend to people who don't need the money by definition. Okay, and when you look at people saying, oh, that's a World Bank idea, is that we're going to lend and bring development by lending. It's very cosmetic, because when you look at the data, as I did in Antifragile, you realize that countries get rich, all right, and then they start having on ne prête qu'aux riches, as the French say. You only lend to the rich, and then they start having a system, a credit system. So it's good to lend for mortgages, maybe, or similar things, but the function of the banking system is largely to enrich bankers, and it's universal. Look at Silicon Valley. I remember in 2000 when Silicon Valley had a problem, Warren Buffett said, look, these people can raise $1.5 billion in a secondary market, and whatever, but they can't borrow $5 million from the bank. He thought it was a bad thing. It's a good thing. So debt is not, we think that debt fuels growth. Debt, some moderate amount of debt can help, but typically debt causes a lot of distortion in systems.
You worked for a couple of decades as a trader, and Eric is asking, from your trader experience, would you see option trading in Lebanon, or will it be automatically a Ponzi?
In 1997, that was my idea, just tell them that it's a compound option. But one statement I'm going to make, I never bet in favor or against anything in Lebanon, just simply out of ethics. But it was too easy a trade. I mean, there are other trades on collapses that goes down.
Okay, I understand that you've been skeptical of the role of the state for the past decades, ever since you were a young teenager with completely different political orientation. But someone is asking, today we have 70% of the Lebanese liberal job practitioners who don't declare or don't pay taxes. He's asking, Pierre Madani, can fiscal mutiny be of order? Can it be efficient? Do you think it's, don't we have as Lebanese a problem with tax evasion? Do you think it's?
I think one of the solutions, I was arguing at lunch with our friend Iyad, who is for, for federalism. And I was telling him that he's, asking too much. You should have one thing that everybody agreed on since Taif. Municipalities should tax directly.
Municipal.
It should be a bottom-up system. From the municipal system, you get taxed and flows up. So in other words, the municipality pays the canton or the kura or something, and the municipality should be free to associate with other municipalities that we have had in Lebanon, associations of municipalities. So that system is vastly more efficient and more direct, and people don't mind paying taxes to their municipality because they see where the money is going. I mean, we see it now in the crisis. A lot of people have written checks to the municipality, many people voluntarily, but I've never seen anybody write a check to the Lebanese government, say, hey, you know, Lebanese government, I'm going to give you $100 million as a gift.
Yes, this
Okay.
was actually another question about the Lebanese legal system. One of your French admirers, Marc Milanini, who describes himself as Libanophile, he said, you once said it's very important to have a good lawyer. What's your opinion of the Lebanese legal system? How can it play a good role in Lebanon's future?
I have no idea, but I mean, the state is basically a legal system. That's the way I view the state, with some insurance for the weak. Okay. And even then, insurance for the weak has functioned a lot better via religious institutions or other non-religious institutions. But it has, so the role of the state is basically an administration. It's not there to curate an identity. It's not there to dictate what you should be doing because they make a lot of mistakes. Just there to service, like the United States. I mean, the people are confused by the United States. The United States is a very decentralized municipal system, you see. But you hear about the president of the United States because you're living in Lebanon, you're not going to hear about the mayor of New Rochelle in New York, okay? Whereas where all the action is local, not central.
Reem Ismail is asking, what do you think of the concept of a startup nation? Israel likes to present itself as a startup nation.
They had a problem with venture capital, with startups, because of the Ponzi. You know, we had in America no interest rates for a long time. So in Lebanon, it translated into people creating a dollar that paid interest rates, unlike the dollars in America that paid no interest rates. But in other parts of the world, which includes that startup nation, or so what you have is zero interest rates. People switched from investing on a cash flow model. In other words, I invest in a company because eventually I'm going to get cash flow in the future, even though you can tolerate negative cash flow quarters, to a model where you're investing in a company solely to be able to sell it to some idiot, okay, or someone intelligent who's going to sell it to an idiot. Okay, so that's the switch from the typical model, thanks to zero interest rates. And this is how you start having tumors in the system, like things that made no sense. So people shoot for valuation. And this is what happened down in Israel, because I'm not sure a lot of these companies are economically viable, but they're constructed in a way to be able so you can sell it to someone else. I mean, the whole thing is funding. I mean, look at Twitter before Elon Musk. They were, if they need what? You need to buy a printer? No problem. You use the funding market as a cash machine, you see.
Another question brings us back to the Lebanese economy. How do you rate the private banking sector in Lebanon? Do you see it re-emerging after this crisis?
I have no idea. First of all, I have no idea about Lebanon. Okay. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. I mean, I'm interested in food. I know what's going on in northern Lebanon, in my village, and I have very little interest about what's going on in the banking system for now.
Does someone has a question about North Lebanon food in the auditorium? We'll take a couple of questions and we'll go back online. Yes, please, a microphone, Jihan.
She has a question here. Yes.
Please short questions because we still have many people online asking.
Good evening. My question is decentralization in Lebanon will awaken the religious and ethnic divisions between the Lebanese?
Okay, let me explain to you one central problem.
And I have a second question, sir.
Yeah, let me answer this one first, and one question at a time. People had the illusion, and that's very French, okay, that if you want to remove sectarian, what you call sectarianism, assuming it's bad, You remove sectarianism by removing sectarianism. Okay, so by having a secular state, in fact, what you end up having with a secular state is majority rules. So in other words, if you have an uneven distribution of the sex, it would be secular, but look at Turkey. Turkey was tolerant, multi-religious, until Ataturk came, or under no, pre-Ataturk, they had that wave of nationalism, secular nationalism. They got rid of Islam. They also got rid of Armenians, and they got rid of the Greeks. Okay, Turkey was what, 20%? What is Turkey now was 20% religious. Okay, so thinking that you're going to go and try to, that the job of the state is to remove religion is, I think, extremely unhealthy, because if you remove religion, you're going to end up with something worse. I mean, you can end up with, like, the mind doesn't like a vacuum. What you need to do as a state is increase tolerance between religions. So if someone doesn't like to see naked women on their beach, okay, it's their right. Okay, it's not your right to go force them to do that. But you can have your town nearby where people are forced to be naked on the beach. You don't allow bikinis. You have to be naked. So it should be the right. And think of what happened every time, every country that tried to remove religion, and we saw under the Shah, we saw another thing, it leads to a huge backlash. So you have to look at how people behave and what's a mechanism by which you can make the place more peaceful. And it's not the job of the state to remove religion. It's the job of the state is to make sure you have peace and coordination between communities.
You hate labels, you hate ideologies. Would you describe yourself as libertarian?
No. I describe myself as someone pragmatic and empiricist. I'm closer to Burkean conservatives in the sense that you're not against progress, but against the rate of progress, because too fast progress may be harmful. Someone else? We have
The second
two ladies. No. You're allowed one question. This is that's a rule by. That's the problem of government. You give someone a microphone and they keep it. They keep it for 20, 30 years. We have two questions. The lady here and
Diana.
Hi, thank you for the conversation. If we were to go back to the bigger picture in Lebanon and moving forward, what is your reading of the economy in the coming 10 years? How do you see the economy?
I have no idea about Lebanon. I really have no idea, except that we're going in the right direction because we did remove some of the state was borrowing money to pay their
Debts.
acolytes and it was a compensation scheme, and it's gone. The economy is going to be healthier. Riyadh hopefully will not come back. I mean, some people are trying to bring them back, and will be, so long as you have anyone in Lebanon of the 4 point something million inhabitants in the central bank that's not Riyadh, we should improve. But that also, you can also bring a monkey from a zoo. If we have a zoo, you can bring a monkey from a zoo and do better than Riyadh. Anyway, so it'll be better in the future. So the lady here has a question. The lady in the.
It's a question Q&As you can ask in French or Lebanese.
You were talking about localism in Lebanon as a kind of administration that is more useful and more peaceful and possibly better than central state. What would you say about the state in Lebanon now? You said about legality. The state is responsible to apply laws. Actually, in Lebanon, no laws are applied except for a few people. It means they are, and it's very localistic, the way they apply the laws. They apply it to some people, to some groups that are their groups. So it's a kind of localism at the level.
I mean, I don't know what's going on. Yes.
Say that, but my question is, how do you see, how can we do with a kind of administration that is called the state, actual state in Lebanon, with no laws and they can apply, and you are calling for localism, why localism is applied. Me, I'm with localism. You said it's
no. Localism means, for me, it means the municipality collects the taxes and they spend it the way they want. So you pay taxes, and the thing flows from the bottom to the top rather than the reverse. I have one more comment here for people who want to remove sectarianism. Countries that do very well, say UAE, very peaceful, understand that Arab tribes develop over more than 1,000 years mechanisms of uh, of um, uh, coordination, just like animals in or you have, they know how to coordinate. Okay, this is your territory, this is my territory, and if you have a conflict, there's a mechanism of conflict resolution, and the UAE followed that tribal mechanism, and they had their divisions, along the tribal, thing, and it works. So you have to work with what works, and what works is, and this is why localism is small, because you let the system organically find its own associations. So the village is the smallest unit, and it can, they can have alliances with other villages and then know how to deal with other villages over the water. If they have fight over the water, they may go to a third village, like Arab tribes used to do. So to survive, this is how the ecology works in conflict resolution. And eventually, I mean, it's good to have a state to have law and law enforcement, but typically they will end up themselves having policing the system to preserve it. And typically, like Arab tribes, you don't have, they had the mechanism of conflict resolution. And if you let, and this is where I feel very positive about system. People hate one another. Okay, that should not be a hindrance. But look at how the Swiss hate one another, right? It's not a hindrance because the system works well. A good system is a system that works well, whether or not people like one another. So you're not going to make people love one another, which is the aim of the state as built by the French in Syria, for example, which practically destroyed Syria.
So Nassim's fans are just like Nassim. They are a bit mischievous and funny. When he said that he does not know about the future of the economy, but that he knows a lot about, he cares about food, Stefan immediately sent the $1 million question: how does kibbeh ras compare to kibbeh bisani? Don't tell me you don't have an opinion on this.
Yeah, I have a very, very strong opinion.
Yeah.
The ras are high in fat, and I love ras. Okay, over kibbeh bisani. Kibbeh bisani is a little dry, and it's the kind of thing that
Kibbeh ras from Zgharta.
yes, from Zgharta is vastly superior to the one we make in Amun.
Wow.
But don't tell anyone. I hope there's nobody from Amun here.
Quite an admission. Yes, let's take a couple more questions in the auditorium and a couple more online.
Hi, I'm a strong believer in localism and I always preach for it. But whenever I speak to someone in authority, I say in Lebanon, the first questions they say me, it is nice, but how you make it work for the poorer area in Lebanon? How can you make the area that they consider to be underprivileged to have not to go down and to,
Okay, I mean,
these are the questions they always ask me.
Okay, that is a good question. I mean, you still have a government that stamps your passport when you come in and out. And that government should help the poor, okay? The very poor. And if these very poor are more concentrated in other areas, it'd be a disproportionate transfer of wealth to that area. But you don't want to give subsidies to people simply because if you give individuals and you have the highest concentration of poor individuals in the north of Lebanon and on the coast, that's fine, it's transferred to individuals. But not to the area and not to the state and not a subsidy to another municipality.
We have an additional question on decentralization. Nada Sahnawi says you're right on. We have to increase the power of the elected municipalities, but the problem is that right now they are too tiny, they are non-sustainable. How do you solve this problem?
As I say, I mean, the thing will develop on their own. It's like, children, they grow as you give them more food and more stuff. They're not gonna grow unless you let them, if you let them tax their own citizens, a lot of them will make mistakes. But a lot of them will do better than others, and you can model after those.
But paradoxically, when France decentralized, it paradoxically increased the number of bureaucrats because you had commune and then you had intercommunalité and then you
No,
had
this is France.
département.
This is France. France is, first of all, France should be a model for nothing, for no one. Let me explain France. But they came up with the idea of égalité.
Except sexual freedom, as you told me.
Yeah, exactly. People, whatever the French say, oh, freedom, égalité, it's always, France is the country where you have freedom, the smallest, the lowest level of freedom of speech in Europe, okay, France. Oh, no, on pense, etc. You have freedom of speech, you have sexual freedom, not freedom of speech. The other thing about France, they like theories, okay? So things work in theory, but not in practice works. The French Revolution, all their ideas set back France. You had what, 64 years of autocracy after the French Revolution?
Yeah,
Okay, and they're still proud of it. I mean, think about it. They're still proud of it. They were moving into a constitutional monarchy, no, and then messed it up with their with Robespierre and all these guys, and then they ended up with Napoleon. Okay, that was, I mean, the whole thing is and then France. Let's talk about France. People had the illusion France is a country, it's a territory of a king, and after the revolution, Napoleon decided that it should be a nation. Okay, somehow, although he was not French, as you know, or he was like his mother became French when she was 3 months pregnant, and then they decided to kill, destroy everything that was local in France. And they tried, they eliminated local languages. Jules Ferry, l'Éducation nationale, were not allowed. You could be punished for speaking your patois, your dialect. It's called a dialect, it's a language. Provençal is a language. Okay, so a guy called, it was a language, a guy called Frédéric Mistral got the Nobel of literature. The second French Nobel in literature went to a guy who wrote in Provençal. Nobody speaks Provençal anymore. So the mission of the state was to try to delocalize. The problem is that it took a long time. So France finally centralized, okay, under Giscard. But de Gaulle said, you have 400 cheeses, how can you run that country? Because, okay, and during the First World War, people don't realize that they had divisions along linguistic lines because people couldn't understand one another. Okay, I mean, they spoke French like people learn Latin today. I mean, it's a classical language. They couldn't speak to one another. So it took a while. So it's only till now. So people think that the success of France comes from centralization, don't know anything about France. So they had to kill 15 languages, a lot of ethnicities, and construct that image. And now it's falling apart again. Thank God. Right?
The French would argue that no, he's perfectly right, because in 1870, according to historian Theodore Zeldin, a British historian of France, only 40% of the French people actually spoke French. All of them spoke their local patois, Auvergnat, Breton, etc. 30 or 35 years later, thanks to public schools, thanks to education, Jules Ferry, France became a nation, and Eugene Weber of Princeton wrote a book, From Peasants into Frenchmen, and he argued that the role of the state was fundamental because otherwise those identities would have remained rigid, immutable. People would have been reified, they would have remained forever Auvergnat or Breton.
So if you think this is good, let's invade. Why did France invade Spain and eliminate the Spanish language? Because, you know, it's the same thing.
Did you see Napoleon at the movie?
No, I don't watch. I can't watch movies. I have. I don't know why. I don't like the moving image.
Saib Zen has a question. Yes.
If they have a YouTube of 2 minutes for on a movie
Napoleon
placement, that works. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I mean, the studies of DIA. Okay, let me tell you something that's going to be speculative, and hopefully is that. Well, first of all, we're the Fertile Crescent. We're part of the Levant. The Levant, the Fertile Crescent is not a crescent. It's more like a crescent plus Anatolia. So we are all Anatolians, and the Palestinians as well, largely Anatolians. Our cultural space is Anatolia. Sorry? The cuisine is Anatolian. The music is Anatolian. okay, with different words, who just speak a Semitic language, and the Anatolians now speak a Turkic language, and or Indo-European language with the Greeks. So we're connected to these guys, but that's not my point. What I saw in the DNA thing, which is obvious, is that the Palestinians are the ancient Jews, are more likely to be the ancient Jews than the Palestinian Christians are indistinguishable from Samaritans. Samaritans are inbred. So they're, you can find, and then we have data from, so in a way, that law of return, that you're returning, who's returning? The Palestinians should apply it, should ask for it. I mean, if you're gonna go by DNA, the effect, I mean, it makes no sense to say, okay, if you originate from here, you can come back after 1,000 years. But if you were to accept the argument, then the first people to come back should be the Palestinians.
Just
So,
a minute away
yeah.
from, we'll go back to DNA, but we have an interesting question from New York from our friend Mark Malek, who is a co-founder of Kulluna Irada. He thanks you for this very stimulating conversation. What does Nassim think of the current debt load of the US over 34 trillion and the fact that the biggest buyer of the US of the treasury papers since 2009 has been the US Fed? Is it another Ponzi? Do you think that, will this be affected by the current inflation problem? The current debt load of the US.
It's big. I don't like it, and I have no more comments.
So the US is also an État Moloch, as you were referring to?
The United States has a more dynamic economy, can handle that, but the problem in the United States is Congress. Congress, yeah. So they keep. So and plus now we have interest on interest. We have the debt servicing that consumes a large share of the deficit. So we may enter a spiral, but not there yet.
You're not there, okay, because some of the economists that you probably don't like, those who keep predicting crises, like Nouriel Roubini says, we're going to have a new global financial crisis. You do not view it coming.
No, I mean, I don't rule it out, but I think that it won't be a banking crisis because banks now became utilities almost in the United States. It will be more of a debt crisis, but every debt crisis in the world turns favorably. It's good for the United States because people start buying U.S. Treasuries, which invites the U.S. to spend more. So this is why I don't have a clear thing in my mind. I think there's a debt crisis worldwide, but I think the United States is going to be the one to suffer last from it.
34 trillion. Yes, a question back there.
Thank you. On the United States, you mentioned that when there's a 0% interest being paid, those places started going to valuation-based investing. They invested in a company just to sell it to another sucker. So things like venture capital, for example, really bloom. Venture capital Ponzi, essentially. So my question to you now, in a higher interest world, what happens to the venture capital asset class? Does it crumble?
It is. I mean, so what happens with venture capital is that by the nature of the product, eventually 99% of the companies go bankrupt. So so they're used to that, and it masks the fact that but one of them will make a lot of money though to cover for these bankruptcies. So they're used to that model. But I think that, but now they're in trouble. Private equity and anyone who is competing with a 5.5% overnight rate is going to suffer big time. So now it's their turn, not ours. So the only thing that can save the United States from debt, I think, is AI, because it may create a lot of efficiencies somewhere. And, but that's a hope.
We can't have localism without any locals. What do you think about the immigration situation in Lebanon?
In Lebanon? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the number, you can't trust numbers in Lebanon. So that's the first thing, is that everywhere. So I wanted to talk, last time I was here, you had balance sheet from the central bank. Now I'm using no numbers because I can't trust numbers. I don't know how many immigrants we have in Lebanon. I don't know what conditions they are. I don't know how many, because migrations are not entirely reversible. So, but it looks like Lebanon has enough demand for labor that it's the industrial people who are encouraging because they got cheap labor, illegal labor. It's just like the United States. In the United States, if you don't have illegal immigration, that you have an explosion in construction costs because just small little shortage leads to explosion. So it's the same thing in Lebanon, and Lebanon needs labor now.
It was actually a very convenient timing with the other question here. Not related to migration. I agree with your premise, Professor Taleb, that one of the main problems in Lebanon and in other countries is that the political institutions do not match the population. And of course, your way to address this, along with Iyad Bustani and others, is to focus more on decentralization and localism. But if we are to match the political institutions in Lebanon with the population that's here, how do we take into account the fact that 1/3 of the population in Lebanon now on that territory is refugees from neighboring countries?
Yeah, that was the previous question, and I'm telling you that I don't have an answer.
Regardless of numbers.
Sorry?
Regardless of numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, if these guys, if someone was not making money out of them, would not be here. So, I mean, first of all, you have a distortion coming from bureaucrats who, like UN. UN is not entirely a good institution for the welfare of countries where they operate, because the bureaucrat wants to have refugees so they get a salary and fly first class or business class to Europe all the time. But there's also industrialists, as I said, who are benefiting from cheap labor. Okay, so so you keep them here, and you don't give them a status of human being, and it's a problem. But if you kick them out, you're gonna have angry UN bureaucrats, but you also will have angry industrialists.
Sorry, we're just going to give the priority to our friend Nadim because he recently had surgery.
And has impaired vision, temporarily impaired vision. So
he's the new Lebanese Taha Hussein.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nassim. We've covered Ponzi enough. But Lebanon has been constantly in crisis for almost 100 years. Does this make it anti-fragile?
Yeah, I mean, we have been discussing that a lot. I mean, have you noticed over the past 4 years that it's safe, that Lebanon remains safe. We have no unrest. We don't have, or if you have unrest, there's a good feedback, and the thing fixes itself very quickly. And it's like similar to Italy. People complain about Italy. It's been in crisis now since the late Roman Republic. Okay, and they're still standing. So the crises are not necessarily bad. The perception of crises, what is bad is, like, small crises are not bad. Bad is stability and then collapse. We don't have that.
Any other questions?
Professor Taleb, we're talking about AI. Don't you think it's a great opportunity for us to get rid from the bureaucrats with AI technology?
That's a good question. Is people threatened by AI are people who have decorative jobs. Okay, so these are the most threatened by AI.
University professors.
If you're not contributing, you can be replaced by AI. So that would be good for this is good for GDP, because you have resources that if you're smaller amount of wasted resources.
And just I want to add something. You have an interesting view on education. You think that we need to focus more on high schools and less on universities. Can you expand?
Yes, I mean, what do you learn here? Faculté de droit de sciences politiques. Sciences politiques. You teach someone sciences politiques. What do you do with them, right? If you teach them how to.
I should not have asked this question to Nadim.
So, all right, so it's the kind of thing you should do on your own over the weekend.
Because I knew the answer.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah.
I liked, or one of the things I liked the most in your writings was your usage of the Lindy effect.
Lindy
And
effect.
since I've been in Lebanon for a while and consider myself a German with some skin in the game here, I wonder if the Lindy effect can be used for predicting anything in Lebanon. Thank you.
You won't like my answer, but I think my friend Nadim said that Lebanon did very well because it went from the 19th century to the 21st century by skipping the 20th century in its entirety. This is why you had all the Aleppo people come over here, all the Egyptian businessmen, from Alexandria, came back. And this is why we had, and we still have, higher standards of living than our neighbors. Relatively, largely because we skipped the 20th century, the ideology of the 20th century, and kept the archaic structure, and maybe it will improve within an existing structure. This is my Burkean conservatism, is that things need to change, but at a certain rate. So the Lindy effect, to explain to people that the longer something has been going around, the more likely it is to survive. Okay, it works for some things, not others, and it's statistical. Doesn't work everywhere.
Malik Al-Jamal. Thank you, Mr. Taleb. Bitcoin is still a Ponzi after the SEC agreed on an ETF?
I have no idea. Plus, I mean,
because you wrote a paper on Bitcoin, so
you don't know. I'm telling you whether the SEC the SEC is not does not engage in lexical speculation. All right, the SEC is an enforcement mechanism, not so they don't decide if it's a Ponzi or not. Yeah, okay, so they're not one of the ones to make a decision.
Yes, Jihan, I see a couple of hands over there.
هاي نسيم. حاب اسالك عن موضوع الاي اي ان جنرال.
بيحكيني بال11
اهلا 11 فيش حد سالك لبناني
جاي من عمان. ايه في احكي انا في غير لغه لاحكي اذا سميتها شامي عالم بيزعلوا، اذا سميتها لبناني غلط لانه نفس اللغه من بكل المشرق. اذا تفضل.
اوكي سو هلا بيسكلي صار عندنا الاونلاين ليرنينج كثير اكتف، يعني صار عندك اي اي يو كان فايند اني ون ان اني فيليج.
لا بدك تنقي اذا تحكي يا انجليزي يا لبناني، ما فيك تخلط هيدي. لا اوكي بدك.
طيب رح احاول. اوكي سو بيسكلي I was going to speak in English خلص اريح خلاص.
نو بدك تنقل، بدك تحكيها بالمشرق. جاي من عمان، بدك انت هونيك.
الذكاء الاصطناعي صار منتشر كثير بكل الدول ان جنرال، وصار عندنا تقدر تحكي الاونلاين ليرنينج، يعني اتس نوت ناو مش انه هلا بس بامريكا لازم تكون عشان تكون شاطر بالاي اي او باي تكنولوجي. بنفس الوقت صار في عندنا الورك فروم هوم هلا كثير منتشر بالعالم.
اوكي
هل هذا معقول يعمل شويه ريفرس ايميجريشن؟
هلا اوكي هلا الشيء اذا بتقول انه في عالم عم يشتغلوا من بيوتهم بيستعملوا بسموه كمبيوتر
حاسوب.
اوكي
حاسوب
بسميها كمبيوتر، تشتغل من بيتك. من زمان كان لتفوت على امريكا تشتغل بامريكا بدك تمرق بالامن، تمرق بالامن العام، بيختموا لك الباسبور، يتغلظوا عليك وتاخذ فيزا وما فيزا. هلا ما بدك فيزا تشتغل من بيتك، ما هيك؟ والمكنه خاصه ما بدها فيزا، ما هيك؟ ما في قانون عمل للاي اي، فيك تشغلهم 24 ساعه ولا ما حدا يعاتبك. بقى في اي اي بينفع كثير بمواضيع مش غيرها. بعدين العالم بيعملوا غلطه، بيفكروا بالاي اي، بيفكروا انه مثل ما لما تجي تكنولوجيا جديده بيصير بتروح انه العالم اللي بيشتغلوا بالموضوع بيخسروا شغلهم. مش مزبوط. هلا محل ما فيه، هلا مثلا انا باخذ كيف بيساعد العالم اللي بيترجموا كتب. بتقولي انه مثلا جوجل ترانسليت ما بيترجموا الاشياء، فيهم ياخذوا محلهم. شو عم بيصير هلا؟ لا العالم بيترجموا كتب عم يترجموا احسن وعم يترجموا كتب اكثر بقى في عندك عالم اكثر عم يترجموا كتب هلا وعدد الكتب الترجمه زاد بقى ما في هلا كمان محل بالطب اكثر محل طلع اكثر محل هي الاشاعه ما هيك لتطلعي واحد كسرت اذا مرت عمك كسرت اجرها نعم نعم اشعه
أشعة أشعة
اشعه اوكي اذا اوكي اذا اذا مثلا يعني مفكرين محل بالطب الاكثر شيء طلع فيه طلب شغل هو بهالمحل اللي مفكرين الاي اي بتاخذ محله. So effectively productivity increases in productivity seems viciously to increase jobs. And this has been happening now since the steam engine, and people don't realize what's going on, and they still think in terms of protecting jobs from AI. خلصنا ما هيك ما بعد في.
I'm skipping some questions. I don't have time to. We don't have time. We apologize to those who we did not address. It was the most interesting discussion as always. Thank you all for being with us, and hopefully we'll do it again before we'll not wait for 4 years this time.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
evening.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye now. Bye now.